All right, welcome back. We're going to take a look at what we've got left to do with the boundary module. So offline, I ran into a few issues while trying to test it before I started the stream. So I'm going to talk through the issues that I found and what I did to fix them very briefly, and then we're going to get on to finishing up the module and getting it published on the registry. So the first issue that I ran into was that the Auth0 application was configured to use a different algorithm with the JWT token. So down here, we're hard coding that we want to use RS256. By default, Auth0 uses a different JWT algorithm, not RS256. So we're now hard coding that up on the Auth0 client so that everybody will have that to use. We could make that an option to be passed in as a variable, same for here, and then we could actually match those two up if we wanted, but I don't really see any point at the moment in doing that, so we're just going to leave it hard coded. Down below, we've added a few more variables. So we've added is primary for scope. That means that we can set the OIDC auth method as the primary auth method for a particular scope, whichever one we're defining. So obviously up here, we specify the scope ID that we're creating this auth method for, because you can have multiple different auth methods for different scopes. So if we want to set this as the primary auth method for the particular scope, we can do that, and then everybody uses this by default. It's also really important that if you want your OIDC provider to be automatically provisioning users within Boundary, it has to be the primary for that particular scope. If it's not the primary, then it won't automatically provision the users. We've got the state. I went over this. I haven't gone over this at all yet, but it's currently set to active public, which basically means that any unauthenticated users can see and log in with the auth provider, the auth method that we're setting. We want that because not a single one of our users will have an authenticated account, so they won't be able to see any auth methods if it's in a different state. And then we've got account claims maps and claims scopes. Again, I will go over these in depth, all of these settings in depth in the complete guide to Boundary course that I'm writing. But basically, we use these to map certain values from the request that we get from Auth0 into an account inside of Boundary. It's the easiest way to think of it. So what does this look like in practice? So this is my kind of terraform example that I've got at the moment. So we've got the providers that we're using. We actually need to add something here. We're missing something for Boundary. So we can do Boundary equals and it'll be a Hashicorp Boundary. And then we can also specify a version as well. I want it to be greater than and equal to, and I need to find the version. We'll get that in a minute. We are specifying 3 variables which are used for our boundary configuration configuring the boundary provider, and then the Auth0 provider is configured through environment variables. I've included a example mvarc file, so this is what I use to set all of the secret values that I don't want people to see. So you can see we've got Auth0 domain, client ID, secret client, boundary address, TFR, auth method ID, TFR password auth method login name, and TFR password auth method password. Those 3 TFRs map to the 3 variables that we're defining here. There's not a way currently, at least I don't know of a way that you can set these with an environment variable like you can for the Auth0 provider. Maybe that's something we can suggest to Hashicorp as an improvement for the provider, as that would make it easier. Then we're actually calling our module. So we've got the name, which is given. We've got our boundary URL. We've got our scope ID. So this is a scope that I've created within my boundary instance. We're setting it to the primary. It defaults to the primary anyway, but I'm just being explicit here that we are setting it to primary. And then we've got our account claims maps. So we're mapping email to email, name to name, and sub to sub. Sub is this is probably the most important one, because we want to make sure that we're mapping all of the correct information to the account that gets created in Boundary. And then we've got claim scope. So these are things that we can request as part of the request to Auth0. So we're requesting email, profile, and sub. And then last but not least, just to give a full example, we're creating a managed group, which is called Platform Engineers. And this is looking for this is doing a filter on the request that comes in from Boundary. So each user will have a request with loads of different information in. Here we're filtering for teams. So if they're a part of the platform engineering teams, or if they've got platform engineering in their teams within the request, we're then going to add them to the platform engineers group. So what does that look like when we go to sign in now? So here we're on the Boundary login screen. We're going to change to our scope that we've configured with Auth0. We're going to sign in. And there we go, we're done. So we can see that we've only got access to the platform engineering scope, because that's the scope that we've created the OIDC auth method for. Under auth methods, we can see we've got one configured, which is the Auth0 one that we've created. And we can see that it's also set to primary. Under projects, we can see that there's one project configured already, which is dev machines. We can go into that and we can see if there are any. So there are no active sessions and there are no targets. So for the module, that is about all we need to do. So if we go to GitHub now and we go over to the repository that we've got for it, we can see that we've got all of our documentation with all of our variables and outputs and the resources that are being used. We've also got a semantic release happening. So every time something's pushed to main, then we'll get a new semantic release. So I want to go ahead and publish this on the registry now. So it's really simple. You log in. I've authenticated with GitHub. Publish module. We select the module that we want to publish. We agree to the terms of use and we click publish module. And it is really simple to publish a module on the registry. So we can see it's pulling in our latest version. And if we scroll down, we've got our README. We've got all of our inputs and our optional inputs. We've got our outputs. We can see our dependencies, so provider dependencies. There are no external module dependencies. And we can see the list of resources that are being used. So that is it for building this module so far. This only does Auth0. So I am going to be building 3 other modules, as I said in the first episode, for Azure, Okta, and Google. If anybody would like to contribute to those or get involved and come on the stream and actually build them with me, please do get in touch. I'm more than happy to have guests on so that we can actually pair on it and build them together. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you will join me for the complete guide to Boundary, where I'll go in depth into all the different things we've talked about and cover scope,